Hey everyone, you are watching the Self Connection with Ginny Brown and Kelly Tetro, where we have conversations with a group of ascended masters known as the Multitude of the Greater Good.
Kelly asked the questions, and I channel the answers from the multitude of the greater good, who are multitudes and multitudes of being with vast knowledge of information based on their lifetimes and also based on the spiritual knowledge that is available to them in spirit. So, feel free to ask your questions, and thank you for watching.
All right, Ginny, so we have a bunch of viewer questions to go through.
Okay,
You ready?
I'm ready.
So for those of you watching at home, if you have submitted your questions, keep your ears perked. We might be answering them today. And if you want to submit a question of your own, not personal questions, but general curiosity questions, you can go to my website, themindfulherbalist.com, click on the self-connection, and there is a form that you can fill out to submit your questions.
Mhm. And if it is that you have personal questions and you are interested in working with either one of us, we would be happy to have a session with you. And I, of course, would channel the multitude in that type of session, and Kelly would get in touch with her herbal information and her energy information. So feel free.
And all our website links are in the video description. So yeah, look forward to hearing from everyone. So here are some questions from our viewers. The first one is, what is the best way to protect ourselves from potential financial crisis that may be coming?
It is important to understand that if it is that one is quite secure within who they are, one's own self, one's own being, the financial crisis will be a nuisance, but not a detriment to the being. In our estimation, it is important that one understand that when one comes to the earth plane, one brings with them all that they need. And if it is that that part of self is dismissed, distinguished, or otherwise unavailable, one will find another way to take care of oneself. In our estimation, it is important to understand that if it is that one is interested in protecting oneself from the outside energies of being, we would highly recommend that one focus on the inner self. Allow oneself the growth, the care, the love, the understanding, the heart self of being to allow the all that is to step in. And when the all that is steps in, one is able to function quite beautifully. In our estimation, it is important to understand that there is a great deal of hype out there, a great deal of misinformation, a great deal of that part of self that it's like the fear, that part that generates the inner fear for someone. In our estimation, 99% of that will not happen. Um, However, it is important to understand that each one, in our estimation, is responsible for each one's own sense of self and being. And if one chooses to allow one to hyperventilate over misinformation, that is how one chooses to be. Do not be concerned. All is love. That's funny.
That's funny. Yeah, I know it's May 15th here, 2025, and there is a lot of talk about impending financial crisis. And I don't know, I just have a lot more faith. So maybe I don't know, I'm disallowing that in my experience, or it, who knows, I guess in the future, but I don't feel impending doom upon us.
Yeah.
I also don't rely on the news regularly. I just kind of shut that out so that I take things as they come.
It is important to understand that there are those who are interested in dismantling the monetary structure that has been set up in the United States, for instance. However, they can only go so far. And once they reach that point, they will be like squished. It will be stopped. And even though there are those who may feel that they have been disrupted in their monetary adventures, it is important to understand that it's like there's no doom and gloom. There's no like there may be a bit of a recession, but no depression. Therefore, we would highly recommend that each one focus on raising their own energetic self, becoming content with who they are, allowing themselves to feel comfortable within themselves, therefore focusing on the inner self rather than the external part of being. We can tell you it is important to focus on one's own circumstances of being on the earth plane. It is also important to understand that there is a great deal out of one's control. And if one is able to say, I am in control of my own life, I am able to take care of myself, I am able to take care of my being and of those around me, then one can assume, one might say, one can focus on that part of self that grows and allow the disinformation, there's that word again, the disinformation to, it's like I'm seeing it go up in smoke. It's like it just will dissipate itself. We can tell you there is that part that is quite serious indeed, but there is also that part has been blown way out of perspective and will not happen. Do not be concerned, all is love.
Well, that's good. That hopefully brings some people some peace of mind.
Yeah, I hope so.
Okay. Are EMF protectors a good idea to use with electronics? Will they actually protect you from something harmful?
It is important to understand if one believes that electronics are harmful, electronics are harmful. If one believes that they are not as bad as one might think, they will not allow the energy to integrate into their field of being. We would highly recommend that if it is that one believes that EMF protectors are protective or worthwhile, then one is encouraged to allow oneself the comfort of was EFT? I forget already.
EMFs.
EMF protector, then we would highly recommend one allow oneself the comfort of a protector. However, we can tell you there are those who believe that it is not a problem at all. Therefore, it is not a problem at all. When one understands that when one believes there is a problem, there is a problem.
It's funny, Ginny, because my old monitor kind of got it, it died. And I
Yeah.
had an EMF protector. And so my husband was bringing in a new monitor. And I went to take the old EMF protector off and it wouldn't come off. And I was like, you know what? I don't need this anymore.
Yeah.
I remember thinking I needed that so much in the past. And now I'm like, no, I'm in charge. So
Yeah, exactly.
my new monitor does not have one. Okay. Um,
But
there,
they do say that often. If one believes there's a problem, there's a problem, whether it's EMF or anything else.
yeah, and I think that's where I'm at now because I've heard the multitude say that so much that I'm like, okay, well, that's on me to try to overcome that. And I guess I did. So,
You know, it also is about raising your own vibrational energy. When you raise your energy to let's say a higher level, for lack of a better word, then the lower level energies, you know, they can't harm you.
yeah, exactly. Okay, so next question is, there is a narrative going around that we will experience 3 days of darkness. What is true or false about this prediction?
It is important to understand that 3 days of darkness was an interpretation of someone's being ages and ages ago. It has nothing to do with this current lifetime of being. If one is interested in experiencing 3 days of darkness, they may choose to do so. However, it will not be of an earth, it's an all-encompassing earth level. It will only be in that part of oneself that is interested in experiencing darkness. In our estimation, it is important to understand there are many who believe that 3 days of darkness is a prophecy of being. However, we can tell you it was someone's idea, someone's interpretation of how it would be if such and such happened, if this happened, if that happened. However, it is not a given that any of their fears would happen. In our estimation, 3 days of darkness is not a possibility at this moment of being.
Well, that settles that then. I love when they do that. Because I think people they get put in a waiting game and
Yes.
this like anticipatory energy. And I remember that during COVID, there were so many channelers like making predictions, and it was all felt very like it put you in this holding pattern, waiting for this or waiting for that. And it's like, oh my gosh, how disempowering.
And produces a lot of anxiety. And when you produces all that anxiety, then you bring all that to you.
Yeah, so I stopped listening to that stuff a while ago. Okay. Do other beings such as aliens, angels, spirit guides, non-earthly beings, etc., feel emotion, feel sensation, taste, smell, see, hear, or are all of their sensations extrasensory slash psychic? It's a loaded question.
Um, it is important to understand that angels, guides, it's like 99% of them. What else was it? Angels, guides, what on the energetic level?
Aliens were in there, non-earthly beings.
It is important to understand angels and guides and those in the spiritual realm are made up of energy. And those qualities that you are looking for are earthbound energies and are in operation on the earth plane. When one is in spirit, one no longer experiences many things that are quite normal or regulatory on the earth plane. However, we can tell you that when it is that one leaves the earth plane, one leaves the egoic uh, information, qualities, experiences behind and brings with them to spirit the emotional, the energetic, and the learning back into spirit with them. In our estimation, aliens and other what energy?
Non-earthly beings.
Aliens and other non-earthly beings are similar. However, they are of a higher energetic level, and 99% of their energy is, what do I want to say? I'm not sure. I just know that they are on a more of a psychic or energetic level than we are, and it's like they don't experience a lot of the same things we do.
Like extrasensory.
I got that. That is truth.
Okay. Can they define egoic? They just mentioned that.
It is important to understand that when one comes to the earth plane, one brings that part of oneself that is ready to experience the earth plane. And that part is known as the ego. And it is quite important that one have an ego on the earth plane. It is how one survives. However, we can tell you, there are those that kind of go overboard with the ego and allow themselves to believe that they are, for instance, bigger or better than anyone else, that ego can become detrimental. However, in order to live on the earth plane, one needs an ego in order to allow themselves to be.
Okay, this is not a viewer question, but it popped into my head, so I have to ask it.
Ask.
When Jesus was incarnate, did he have a big ego or was his story manufactured?
It is important to understand that he was quite sure of who he was when he allowed himself to come to the earth plane, allowed himself to experience his experiences. Some were planned, most were not. However, we can tell you when one is quite sure of who one does not need to be boastful. It's like of a high energetic, um, it's like an all out there ego, where one believes one is of a higher or greater value than anyone else. We can tell you that he is able to allow himself to be who he is when he is, regardless. And his ego is quite like under check. His ego is not, was not at that time. Um, uh, it's like able to take over his being. In our in our estimation, he knew why he had come to the earth plane. He had come to help. He had come to care. He had come to help others in that which he knew. And he knew a great deal about healing. He knew a great deal about helping others. And that was his goal. When it is that one says, he was the Son of God, and he this and he that, we can tell you, you are all sons and daughters of God. You are all part of the all that is. And you are all able to bring to you those parts of self that are required for you to move yourself forward on the earth plane. Not everyone comes to the earth plane to help others or heal others. Some come to the earth plane to be helped and to be healed. Do not be concerned, all is love.
And he did say, supposedly, you will do greater things than I. So I tend to think his ego was pretty well in check and that the stories that make him sound boastful were twisted. That's my opinion.
Well, I think, if someone, and I'm assuming him too, but if someone is in a place where they are comfortable with others and feel quite confident in who they are, they can let themselves be seen and they can let themselves, share their information more openly than someone. And, I don't know, maybe he was extroverted and felt quite comfortable doing that. Maybe he was extroverted in some areas and not others. But if one is comfortable in the group they're in, they're more open to share who they are and not necessarily from a large ego perspective, but from that knowing and that helping and that sharing and that caring perspective.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, thank you for that. I'm going
Okay.
to keep going on these questions.
Okay.
Okay, what is a star seed?
That's a good question. It is important to understand there is no such thing as a star seed. Each one is created at the same time. Each one allows oneself to be who one is when one is, and allows oneself to be wherever one feels most comfortable. If one chooses to come to the earth plane, one allows oneself to learn on the earth plane. If one chooses to experience time, say on a star or another planet, that is also a possibility of being. However, there is no star seed, so to speak. Each one is each one individually on the earth plane. And each one allows oneself to, it's like each one is, excuse me, everyone was created at the same time. And it's like what I'm seeing is everyone was created, it's all energy, and the energy was dispersed. Some chose to stay in spirit, some chose to experience other things, and they could go anywhere they want, but they're all energy and they're all returned to energy. That's what I was saying. I don't know. I'm getting anything more.
All right. Okay, this one, a little bit of a trigger warning for our viewers. The question about suicide. If you commit suicide, okay, this is a statement that I don't know if I agree with, but whatever, we'll see what they say. If you commit suicide, you have to come back and do it all over again. On the other hand, if we are returning over and over again, what's the difference?
It is important to understand that if one chooses to leave the earth plane before one's actual planned excavation of being, one is challenged by the perception that suicide is not a positive education on the earth plane. We can tell you there are many ways for one to experience an education, and suicide is one of them. However, we do not recommend it, as it is quite a difficult experience to live through when one returns. However, we can tell you it is not a negative. There are never negatives. It's always learning, learning, learning. If one chooses to come back to the earth plane, one can come back to the earth plane. It's like along with the experience, the knowledge of the experience, and one can come back to the earth plane to continue one's journey. It is important to understand that when one comes to the earth plane, one does a great deal of planning, a great deal of connecting, a great deal of allowing what it is that they need to learn, how it is that they need to help, how it is that they need to be helped. All those types of things are planned before coming to the earth plane. If one chooses to come to the earth plane and accomplish a part of that system, one may choose to leave without completing all that one had wished to accomplish. However, we can tell you it does not matter. When one returns, one has a choice. One can change their initiatives. One can change how they perceive their initiatives. One can choose to return and complete processes that have been left behind or add processes. There are many ways of experiencing the earth plane. However, we can tell you if it is that one chooses to experience suicide on the earth plane, it is a very difficult process for that person indeed, both on the earth plane and in spirit, in order to allow one to reconcile with oneself. Do not be concerned, all is love. I can't hear you.
Thank you. I just feel the need to say that there is help for anyone feeling this way. 988 is the crisis lifeline. And none of this is advice.
Mhm.
It's just,
Entertainment purposes only.
yeah. These taboo topics are a little scary to talk about, Ginny, in a public forum.
Yeah. Well, yes and no.
Okay. Next question. Would you please be so kind as to ask the multitude of the greater good to fully but concisely tell us all they know about light language? Who, what, where, when, why, and how?
I like the way that person asked, would you be so kind? Yes, I'd be happy to. It is important to understand that light language is another energetic level of being. It is not that one is any of a higher level or any of a lower level. It is just a different way of managing one's own being. When one is able to access one's own senses and one's own, say, clairs or clair abilities, one is also able to allow oneself to experience different levels of energetic being, and light language is one of those. We can tell you that on the earth plane, it is not understandable. However, when one like channels light language, it's like as I channel the English language, when one channels the light language, one is able to communicate with others on the earth, on the spiritual plane. However, one does not necessarily know on the earth plane what that light language is like conveying from and to another. It is important to understand that there are different ways of experiencing light language, and when one is open to receiving it, one may or may not choose to share it with others, as one may believe it is a problem rather than a ability. It is important to understand that light language is quite wonderful indeed. However, it is no higher or greater than any other experiential sense of self. Do not be concerned, all is love.
So there is part of for those who like this idea of light language is new, like I kind of want to share what I've seen out there. I've seen people channel light language verbally, which sounds like a foreign language that nobody can translate. And they'll sometimes say, I don't know what it said, but I knew how it made me feel. Or some people do know a translation. I've seen people do light language with their hands. I don't know. That was not light language. That was me pretending. I've seen people draw or write light language.
Well, if you draw or write light language or do it with your hands, is that light language?
That's a good question.
I don't know that I would agree that that's light language. I've heard people sing it, and it is
Yes,
beautiful.
beautiful.
Yes.
Okay, so well, let's ask the multitude. Of these things, which are and which are not light language? Voice conveyance either through words or singing.
It is important to understand the energetic value of singing is that part of self that is releasing self. And the words that are conveyed makes no difference, as it is not a mental configuration of being. It is it's like a heartfelt spiritual endeavor. Do not be concerned.
Okay, what about writing?
It is important to understand that writing, unless one is able to, it's like, when you speak like language, it's not understandable. But when you write, if you write light language, it would still be not understandable. However, if you write like in automatic writing, no matter what language it comes in, it's still writing and connecting with yourself and spirit and allowing the energy to flow. Sometimes the energy can be translated into who you are at the moment, and sometimes it cannot. However, we can tell you all energy is energy. Do not be concerned, all is love.
Okay, so then when people write something and they call it light language, but it's an uninterpretable text of symbols, are you saying that that's not light language?
It is important to understand that was not the question you asked.
Okay.
When it is, when they write in symbols, so to speak, they are connecting with themselves on a different level of being, one that is not understandable on the earth plane because they have chosen not to bring through the energy that corresponds with the symbols. If it is that they were choosing to bring through that energy, there will be translatable words. We can tell you it is not necessarily light language. It is a language of their own interpretation on the earth plane.
Will future humans be able to interpret these documented cases?
Documented cases of what?
Like documented interpretations of what people call light language. It's this uninterpretable text right now, but in time, will humans be able to interpret them?
It is important to understand that it is a possibility. However, at this moment, it is not in the plan of being.
Okay, and then what about the hand gestures? Would this be considered light language? What's more?
It's important to understand that when one uses hand gestures to allow themselves to, it's like raise their energetic connection, it would not, in our estimation, be considered light language. It is a means of raising one's own energetic ability on the earth plane, like their vibratory
And
level.
I guess I'm trying to think of all the versions I've seen. What about art and dance? Like painted or drawing, that type of visual art or
It is important to understand neither one of those are light language. They are, however, an interpretation of what one knows of one to be. It's like what one knows of oneself to be.
all right, cool. Did I get all of them, Ginny? That what people call light language was
I don't know. I don't know. But it covered a few.
yeah. I think that might have been our last one. We just scan really quick. Yeah, I think that's our last one for tonight at least.
Okay.
And we definitely would love to hear more questions from everyone else. Because otherwise I'm talking about either what I'm interested in or what I think you might be interested in. Even if you wanted to send in a topic and you don't have a question, hey, Kelly, let's cover this topic. I'm sure I can then come up with questions. I'll be guided. But it definitely helps to hear from our viewers. This is for you guys, so
Right.
chime on in.
Absolutely.
All right, well, Ginny, thanks for channeling Multitude. Well, does the Multitude have any closing that they want to share or they feel good about this?
It is important to understand that each one has their own way of being on the earth plane, their own meaning for being on the earth plane, and their own interpretation of who they are. If one is able to move forward in a sense of self, of being, of uh, alacrity, their own sense of being, of flagrancy, their own sense of being, of ability, then each one is able to move themselves forward in the way they choose to. We can tell you, in our estimation, there is no reason for anyone to be concerned about who they are, why they are, when they are. Each one has come to the earth plane to live, to learn, to grow, to be, and to experience. Do not be concerned, all is love.
I looked up alacrity. Have you ever heard that word before?
I have, but I don't know what it means. I don't remember.
According to Oxford Languages, it means brisk and cheerful readiness.
Ah,
Used in a sentence, it's she accepted the invitation with alacrity. It's similar to eagerness, willingness, readiness, enthusiasm, fervor. So there you go. That makes sense.
I like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
very
All
good.
right. Well, thank you for that closing message to the multitude. Thank you, Ginny, for channeling.
It's like they said you're quite welcome, and I am happy to channel anytime. So thank you for being a good question asker.
Well, thank you to our viewers for sending those questions in. So keep them coming.
Absolutely.
All
All
right,
right.
everyone. We'll see you next time on The Self Connection. Bye.
Bye.